My name is Ann Dillibert Youngblood, and it's November 23rd, 2003. On September 11th, 2001, I was teaching school to second graders. And I didn't know anything about any of the happenings until my lunchtime, because when I'm teaching school, I'm in a classroom where I'm working with little second graders, so we really don't have time to talk or see anything about the outside world. And when at about 11:30, I heard that the Trade Center had been hit, but I was worried, but I wasn't alarmed to be frightened too much. I was sort of worried about my sisters, but I thought the Pentagon would be safe. I went into lunch, and when I was there, they told me the Pentagon had hit, and then this rush of of a hot feeling in my and blood turning red it was just started making me worried about what happened to them. Are they all right? So my first thought was to get to the phone, and another friend wanted to get the phone to call for her sister, and I told them I had two sisters there. So I called my parents, who are in their 80s, because I figured they would call them first. Uh, and I expected to hear Patty's calling first and telling me that Kathy was all right, because Patty often had to call like 2 or 3 times and speak to my parents to remind them that she was okay. She always made sure that everybody was safe. And I heard that Kathy called. Mom said Kathy called, but they hadn't heard from Patty. Patty Dillibert Mickley was my sister who was killed on that day. She was 41 years old. She worked for the DIA, a name that I really didn't know anything about until after this incident happened, this tragedy. Um, my mother told me that Kathy had called and talked to her and said she was safe and everything. I knew none of the circumstances. I didn't understand what was going on, but I was sure Patty was safe. I didn't hear from anyone else until I ran to home, got out of school and went home and called again and called Patty's house, hoping that maybe she would have been there. And I was glad to hear her husband, Joe, talk to me, but I was kind of wishing it was Patty's voice. But I knew that maybe Patty was doing other things or helping other people out. So I asked him if he wanted me to come. He said yes, so I hurried up in the car and just took my purse and coat and drove a half an hour to their house. When I got there, Joe had all these little pieces of paper all set up on the table, the kitchen table, and with names on them, and he was on the phone. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was trying um, uh, to locate where people that had seen Patty last. So I let him do this, and I walked over into the kitchen, and I asked him where his daughter was, and he said that he'd had a neighbor watching her at that time. So I walked over to the counter of the kitchen, and on the counter, I remember something that is an everlasting image to me of the symbolism of what my sister was like, loving children. She had a little lunchbox there that must have been my niece's from kindergarten that day. And the lunchbox was open and the little cup was out, but there was a note on the counter, and it was from Patty to her daughter saying, "Dear Marie, have a good day. Mommy and Daddy love you. I love you, Mommy." And I just thought, boy, she's just starting kindergarten. These are such fun times. I hope Patty gets to enjoy this. And then I went back over to the table, and as the evening went on, people started coming over, and I talked to some of my other family members and my daughters, and at first no one was really panicky. They were just kind of thinking, well, certainly with all that big as that place was and as many people, we're certainly going to find her sooner or later, or she's injured. And we called everyone called the hospitals and traveled, and it was getting darker, and her husband Joe had his cousin there, Pete, and it was probably around 7, and we'd gotten Marie by then and brought her home, and I was helping to get her fed, and we were just kind of waiting around for the next phone call. Waiting for a phone call was just the most dreaded feeling. I mean, every phone call, oh, it's Patty. Someone's going to tell us where she is. And no one heard her name. People calling, have you seen Patty? Have you heard from her? Is Patty still missing? Yes, Patty's missing. Okay, thank you. Her boss calling, the admiral calling. Okay, we're just trying to locate all the people that we have not been accounted for. Well, then I thought, oh, no, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And this was on a school night, so normally I knew that I would have school the next day. As it is, they canceled all schools. So I stayed and didn't want to leave the telephone. I stayed by the TV set, and I stayed by the telephone. I held the remote phone in my hand, hoping for the next phone call. I remember just holding that phone and holding it and just waiting for them to say, we found her. But they didn't. They didn't tell us that. And finally I told Joe, I said, why don't you go down to the Pentagon with Pete and see if you can find out anything? And he said, oh, I don't think we'll be able to get through. They've got it blocked off, and it's just all this tight security. And I said, well, just try. So finally Pete agreed with me, and they left, and I said, don't worry about Marie, I'll take care of her. I just think that it would be better to try to see what the situation is. Knowing nothing was worse than knowing something, I thought. So he left, and when he finally came back, he gave me a grim overview because it didn't look very positive, although I don't think he tried to make me feel that it was hopeless at that time. But he let me know that that where her office was not a good scene, and he'd said he used his credentials to try to get through, and he said he volunteered to help, but they said no, and then he came back. So I think that at that moment, when he had been there, that he probably was in fear of worse things than I was, because I held out hope like my sister Kathy did for about 3 days. But late at night when it was dark, I just prayed that she wasn't in someplace hurting, burning, or scared. She doesn't like the dark. And I prayed that she was safe. Well, she wasn't, because we found out later that her sight was one of the most deadly hit on that direct impact. So then the grim reality of what happened hit. And then from that day on, it was just motion from going from one thing to another. People talking to us, people asking us questions. And like anything, all kinds of fears happened, and I was just so angry. I was so angry because she had so much life in her, so much to live for, and just beginning to raise a little girl. And it just didn't seem fair. It just didn't seem fair to me that it should happen like this. But I was trying to understand it, and I even talked in the family center to a priest, and And one of his thoughts were to me that was a good person, and God felt she was ready, and that she's happy now, and she's in heaven, and not to worry about her anymore, is to worry about people on the earth, but that she's fine, and not to. That's kind of hard to accept at that moment when you're facing this reality of what's going on all around us, and seeing the sadness in all your relatives and your children and your own family. And I know my sister held up hope to the end, and I felt that if she could, it's because she was there, that I certainly should help hold hope too. Until the day that they finally admitted to us that they had found her, then I knew it was reality. Or did I? I don't know. I don't know if I still know it's reality. I've been to a grief counselor, and it's helping. But there are moments when I keep thinking maybe that she'll be calling me on the phone. You see, Patty was always in touch with every single member in her family. She always talked to each one of us, and I thought it was just me, but I think that she had a really, really special bond. And at the funeral, I remember people saying things like, oh, she had such a smile on her face all the time. And, oh, she loved Disney. Oh, she loved to have, she used to love to laugh. And she, as my girls would say, that they always looked forward to her giving them balloons on her birthday. And my girls, my daughters, just adored her. They were very involved with her life as she was with them, and they were so used to seeing her ever since they were born, that this was their first real experience of death. Now, I've been around death before, but this was different. Yes, she was my younger sister. Yes, it was a tragedy, but everywhere you went, there were reminders of it, even when you tried to gain solace with it. I know people were grieving all around the world. I know people were thinking and just as unhappy as we were, and I appreciate the flags on cars and the flags all around, but as helpful as it was in one way, it was also a reminder to me that she was not there. And the enormity of the whole thing of her funeral, when the funeral procession went to Arlington Cemetery, and they closed 395, and the police motorcycles blocked traffic for us to get there. It just was, I was proud of her because I knew she was such a hero, and I was proud of that she let everybody see. I realized how much people loved her. I hope she could see that the world loved her so much. And I hope that that we can, as her family, carry on her dreams with her daughter, to make her a little bit appreciate the things that she would have wanted her daughter to know. To laugh, to love balloons, to love Mickey Mouse, to love Disney movies, to love dancing, to love ballerinas, to love playing with her little dolls on the floor, to have the spirit of laugh. These are all things I hope that all her friends and all her relatives and people from the past remember her as a loving spirit, and I hope that we can do the same for her, to give her daughter something special.